Hello there and welcome to the final episode of my Caucasus series, wrapping up my time in Azerbaijan. The flight from Tbilisi took just over an hour, landing at Heydar Aliyev International Airport in Baku. Hounded by taxi drivers when exiting the arrival doors, I headed over the road to order a cab on Yandex so I'd know how much it would be up front. Off into the city centre we went. Although I was staying in the old town and taxis aren't allowed in that area, so I was dropped off nearby. I loved my room, a fusion of modern decor and the old town aesthetic. Not sure about the gold toilet though. I suppose you could call it a royal throne. Bags dropped off, I headed out to make the most of this lovely afternoon, and to explore the cobbled streets, and check out potential souvenirs, with a bit of time left over for sightseeing. First up was the Maiden Tower, or Kiz Kalisi in Azerbaijani, that dates back to the 15th century. There are a fair few steps to get to the top, with museum rooms along the way. But it's worth it. From the top you get a fantastic 360 view of the city, taking in the old town, the various skyscrapers, and the sea. After that I continued my stroll around this area, taking in more of this ancient architecture, and said hello to a local resident. Like Istanbul, cats are everywhere in Baku. Next up was the Palace of the Shirvan Shahs, which like Maiden's Tower dates back to the 15th century. Both are also UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The outside felt a bit like I was walking around a Game of Thrones location, while inside the main building you can find ancient artifacts. More cats. Yeah, if you don't like cats, I'd maybe not recommend Baku. There are other smaller structures located within the palace, which are also worth checking out while you're there. Just around the corner was the Miniature Book Museum, and as it says on the plaque, it's free to enter. It's exactly what you'd expect on the inside. Lots of tiny books. Although given their size, it's a very small museum. But plenty of classics in miniature form. I do love an old town. Although these days they're usually one of the worst places for tourist traps, it can still give you a feel for how life might have been back when the old town wasn't quite so old. But I needed to see outside of this area too, so headed down to the waterfront via a small park complete with an ornate fountain and free music. The aesthetic outside of the old town, even though modern builds, tries to keep some of that look so the two worlds have some synergy between them. Yes, there are buildings that don't do that, like the Flame Towers, but it's nice to see that some effort was made. Down by the sea, there's a nice promenade and plenty of space to relax and take in the views. There's also this Little Venice area, and it is very little, offering gondola rides and some nice looking restaurants. My first day in Baku was nearing its end, and with the sun starting to set, I headed back to the old town to find somewhere to eat. I'd been away for almost 2 weeks at this point, so I got a side salad and something called shah pilaf, a variety of plov I believe, which is rice cooked with spices and fruits encased in a thin phyllo-style pastry. And a plate of grilled meat, you know, to balance out the salad. After dinner, I went back to the waterfront to check out the Flame Towers and their nighttime graphics. Before bed, I picked up a couple of beers from a mini-mart. I'd not had one at dinner as being a Muslim country, beer isn't as widely available as it is most places I've been, but they do still have their own brand, although these days it's brewed by Carlsberg. And with that, my first day here was done. Day 2 started by heading up past the Flame Towers to gardens overlooking the city centre. More importantly, this long pathway is known as Martyrs Lane, and commemorates fallen Azerbaijani soldiers from the First Nagorno-Karabakh War, as well as Black Saturday, where 147 people lost their lives during an uprising to overthrow the then Soviet Azerbaijani government. At the end of the lane, you have the Eternal Flame, which is also dedicated to Black Saturday. I spoke to a security guard who told me about the history behind this place, but unfortunately the wind coming in meant you can't make out what he said well enough. It must have been due to the angles, because you can hear him well enough in a second after we changed positions. But now we were talking about football.
Are they top?
The views across the city and out to sea are fantastic, and it was a perfect day for taking it all in. That's the year Azerbaijan hosted Eurovision, in case you were wondering. As you saw, I walked up to the gardens, but to get back down there was a short funicular, which you can take to get up as well. Back at the bottom, next to my itinerary for day 2, was this funnily shaped building, the Carpet Museum. It's supposed to look like a rolled up bit of carpet. If you're a carpet or rug fan, and I'd say I certainly am, then you're in for a treat here. There was even a woman working her magic hands on some carpet. Seriously though, this style of rug is actually my favourite. I have one of a similar style underneath my feet right now. Although mine was from Argos. Not quite the same. With the weather being as lovely as it was, I grabbed myself an ice cream and headed along the waterfront again. This time going a bit further down to this mini pier type bit. Lovely. Even though I wasn't here for shopping, I still wanted to check out some of the main streets that weren't in the old town. It was just your standard shops, bars, cafes, but it was still nice. I liked the look of it all, and it was all very clean. I'd say overall that Baku was one of, if not the cleanest places I've ever been. Back to the old town again. I was peckish, so I went to find some lunch. This bright pink thing is called compote, but to me it was like squash. Still nice though. Complimentary bread, which I'd seen an elderly woman baking in the kitchen, so it was nice and warm. To start, I had a kutab, which is very thinly rolled dough, which can have a variety of fillings. This one was lamb, almost like a savoury crepe. If you followed since the start of this series, you'll know I'd had a lot of grilled meat by now, so I went for a lula kebab, but the potato variety. To finish, I had dushbura, a broth containing mini dumplings filled with meat. To walk off lunch, I went hunting for the one souvenir I always pick up these days. That's right, a magnet. There were almost too many to choose from, but I picked up this nice little round one. And chilled for a bit with a beer. As usual in this city, I had company from some four-legged friends. So many cats. After that, it was time to do something different. Something I'd attempted to do in Georgia, but failed at.
Hello, just about to head off to my first ever football match in Azerbaijan. Let's go.
I needed to hunt for a taxi first. And it was rush hour, so finding somewhere I could get picked up easily was proving difficult. I made it though, arriving at the Tevfik Baramov Republican Stadium. This venue was originally named after Stalin and then Lenin, but since 1993 it's been named after Tevfik Baramov, the linesman who awarded Jeff Hurst's second goal in the 1966 World Cup final. That definitely crossed the line, okay? I was here to see Karabag take on Malmo from Sweden in the Europa League tie. Karabag are named after the region of the same name, which lies on the west of Azerbaijan, bordering Armenia. However, due to conflicts and ongoing disputes in that region, they've not played there since 1993, making Baku their new home. My ticket cost €8, and that wasn't even the cheapest ticket. I bought my ticket online, and someone just beat me to the last €2 ticket, so I had to pay 4 times that much. Outrageous! A section of the home fans, I presume the ultras, were buoyant, making plenty of noise. Out came the players. This was actually my second time seeing Malmo play, having seen them back in 2012 in Malmo against Norrköping in the Allsvenskan, the top league in Swedish football. Malmo were booed almost every time they touched the ball, and there were horns being blown all around me. It was certainly a good atmosphere. The noisy locals were rewarded with a goal for Karabag to put them ahead. But it didn't take long for Malmo to equalise. Still, the home fans were happy. Some great defending and goalkeeping kept Malmo from taking the lead before the break. Half-time came and it was still 1-1. The players were back out and we were underway again. Bad news though, Malmo took the lead just 2 minutes into the second half. Karabag thought they'd equalised. But in stepped VAR. As I can't read Azerbaijani, I'm not sure what it was for. I can only guess offside. And that was how it stayed. Sadly, I couldn't share in celebrations with local fans. Still, it was fun for me and a good way to spend my evening. Probably one of the lesser visited venues when it comes to European competitions at club level. Day 2 was done. Day 3 was an early start, and the weather had taken a turn. I arrived by the main Old Town gates to await pickup for a tour. I don't usually do tours, preferring to do most things by myself, but as I hadn't hired a car in Baku, this was the best way to see what I wanted to see that wasn't in the city itself. I waited. And I waited. Thanks to one couple turning up late, we left an hour later than we should have done. Finally underway, our first stop was to see the world's first mechanically operated oil drill. While it's not in operation anymore, there are more modern examples at this site too. Back on the road, stop 2 was just down the road, the Bibi Hebat Mosque. The original mosque on this site dated back to the 13th century, but was destroyed by the Soviets in the 1930s. This new mosque was completed in the late 90s, and while it may be a relatively new build, the architecture is no less stunning than other ancient mosques I've visited. Sometimes people ask me why I bother going to mosques and churches, etc. if I'm not religious, but they still have something to offer even atheists such as myself. They're feats of human engineering, and can be vital parts of communities helping to bring people together. We spend a lot of time these days focusing on the negatives of religion, and while I don't believe in any god or prophet, I do believe that religion still has a lot of good to offer, including what I've already mentioned, as well as what it can teach us. On the road again, it was off to stop 3. Here you'll find the Gobustan petroglyphs, rock carvings to us non-experts. Another UNESCO World Heritage Site. The oldest carving that's been found is said to date back to somewhere between 3701 and 3800 BC. That's almost 6,000 years ago. Most of the carvings are fairly basic as you'd expect given their age, almost like stick figures, but there were some animals as well as boats, but not everything was easy to make out. The only problem with doing this as part of a tour is that the time here was shorter than I'd have liked, not helped by the people that turned up late. Back on the minibus, stop 4 was even shorter. After going over some very bumpy dirt tracks, we arrived at the mud volcanoes, also in Gobustan. No eruptions here, just the odd little bloop from the grey mud, like a simmering soup. Or this one, that was more like a fart or a queef. Wait, that's a bit more exciting. It was a packed itinerary, so off we went on to stop 5. We arrived at Yanadag, where a natural gas fire burns in perpetuity. It was pretty hot. Not surprisingly, the red line was there as a guide of where to stop. Not that that did stop some people. Although small, it was still impressive and worth seeing. I think, anyway. Time for a late lunch, and I was starving. I'd not eaten since breakfast. A traditional looking place. I liked the decor. Plenty of carpet. Soup to start, and other than that, it was your standard grilled meat. Nothing you've not already seen in my videos. We were approaching the early evening now, but there was time for one last stop. Stop 6 involved more fire, being the Atashka, or Fire Temple. From what I can glean, the temple was finished somewhere in the 18th century, but there is evidence that humans worshipped at this site long before then. The flames here come from gas pipes. However, until the late 60s, they were natural like the ones at Yanadag. All in all, a successful day, and I'm glad I did the tour. I met people from all over the world. China, the US, Sweden, Belarus, Russia. But it was time to head back into central Baku. Pre-dinner I tried a shekabura, a pastry filled with ground nuts, absolutely delicious by the way, along with some Azerbaijani tea. For actual dinner I went here to Lakuzu, on the recommendation of a couple of Russian women that I met on the tour. To start I had mankal salati, a warm aubergine salad that's so good I've made my own since. I was seated in this inner courtyard, lovely although I did feel a bit out of place on my own. As well as the salati, I had another kutab, and more of that Azerbaijani style bread. Man, that stuff is some of the best bread I've ever had. Lula kebab again, but made of meat this time. And this decadent layered honey cake, which is very similar to a Lithuanian cake that I've made myself in the past. My night ended with a short walk back to the hotel, the flame towers lit up in the distance. My flight was the next day, but I did have a bit of time in the morning to very quickly explore a bit further down the promenade, including seeing bits left over from the previous month's F1 race that hadn't been removed yet. I popped back into the old town to pick up some shekabura and tea to take home. And boom! Just like that, I was on my way home. 2 weeks away by myself, the longest solo trip I've ever done. But what a time. Magnet added to the board. Post-trip ritual complete. So, Azerbaijan, have you been? And if so, what did you think? Let me know down below. I've already got my next adventure booked, but you'll just have to wait and see where that's going to be. The best way to find out is to like and subscribe. That's all for today's video, and sadly my time in the Caucasus. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good one, and I'll catch you next time.